Hola, Hawthorne and Sycamore. I'm going to continue with our class reader. I started it yesterday. If you haven't seen the first one, I would start there. It's Michael Wapergo's Kensuke's Kingdom, and we're now on chapter 2, Water, Water Everywhere. They say that water covers 2/3 of the Earth's surface. It certainly looks like that when you're out there, and it feels like it too. Seawater, rainwater, all of it is wet. I spent most of the time soaked to the skin. I wore all the right gear. The skipper always made sure of that, but somehow the wet still got through. Down below too, everything was damp, even the sleeping bags. Only when the sun shone and the sea had stopped its heaving could we begin to dry out. We'd haul everything out on the deck, and soon the Peggy Sue would be dressed overall. One great washing line from bow to stern. To be dry again was a real luxury. But we always knew it could not last for long. You may think there was not a lot for 3 people to do on board, day after day, week after week. You'd be quite wrong. In the daylight, there was never a dull moment. I was always kept busy, taking in sail, winching in, letting out, taking my turn at the wheel, which I loved, or helping my father with his endless mending and fixing. He often needed another pair of hands to hold and steady as he drilled or hammered, or screwed, or sawed. I'd forever be mopping up, brewing up, washing up, drying up. I'd be lying if I said I loved it all. I didn't. But there was never a dull moment. Only one of the crew was allowed to be idle, Stella Artois, and she was always idle. With nothing much to bark at out on the open ocean, she spent the rougher days curled up on my bed down in the cabin. When it was fine and calm, though, she'd usually be found on watch up at the bow, alert for something, anything that wasn't just sea. You could be sure that if there was anything out there, she'd spot it soon enough. An escort of porpoises, perhaps, diving in and out the waves. A family of dolphins swimming alongside. So close that you could reach out and touch them. Whales, sharks, even turtles. We saw them all. My mother would be taking photographs, videos, and still, while my father and I fought over the binoculars. But Stella Artois was in her element, a proper sheepdog. Again, barking her commands at the creatures of the sea, herding them up from the deep. Annoying though she could be, she would bring her smelly wetness with her everywhere. We never once regretted bringing her along with us. She was our greatest comfort. When the sea tossed and churned us, and my mother felt like death from seasickness, she'd sit down below, white to the gills, with Stella on a lap, cuddling and being cuddled. And when I was terrified by the mountainous seas and the screaming wind, I would curl up with Stella on my bunk, bury my head in her neck and hold her tight. At times like that, I don't suppose they were that frequent. It's just that I remember them so vividly. I always kept Eddie's football close beside me as well. The football had become a sort of talisman for me, a lucky charm, and it really seemed to work too. After all, every storm did blow itself out in the end, and afterwards we were always still there, still alive, and still afloat. I hoped my mother and father might forget all about the planned schoolwork, and to begin with it seemed as if they had. But once we had weathered a few storms, once we settled and well into our voyage, they sat me down and told me the unwelcome news. Like it or not, I was going to have to keep up with my schoolwork. My mother was adamant about it. I could see that any appeals to my father would be pointless. He just shrugged and said, "Mum's a skipper." And that was the end of the matter. At least at home she had been my mother, and I could not argue with her. But not on the Peggy Sue. Not anymore. It was a conspiracy between them. They had devised an entire programme of work. There were maths course books to get through. My father would help me with that if I got stuck, he said. For geography and history, I was to find out and record all I could about every country we visited as we went around the world. For environmental studies and art, I was to note down and draw all the birds we saw, all the creatures and plants we came across. My mother made a particular point of teaching me navigation too. "Barnacle Bill taught me," she said. "I'm teaching you. I know it's not on the curriculum, but so what? It could come in handy, you never know." She taught me how to use the sextant, the compass bearings, plot a course on the chart. I had to fill in the longitude and latitude in the ship's log every morning, every evening, without fail. I don't think I ever really noticed stars before. Now, whenever I was on watch in the cockpit at night, with the Peggy Sue on her wind vane, stealth-steering, the others asleep below, the stars would be my only company. Gazing up at them, I felt sometimes that they were the last people alive on the whole planet. There was just us, and the dark sea about us, and the millions of stars above. I was on watch at night, that I would often do my English. This was my own version of the ship's log. I didn't have to show it to them, but I was encouraged to write it in it every few weeks. It would be, they said, my own personal private record of our voyage. At school, I had never been much good at writing. I could never think of what to write or how to begin. But on the Peggy Sue, I found I could open up my log and just write. There was always so much I wanted to say. And that's the thing. I found I didn't really write it down at all. Rather, I said it. I spoke it from my head, down my arm, through my fingers and my pencil, and on the page. And that's how it reads to me now, all these years later, like talking. I'm looking at my logbook now. The paper's a bit crinkled, and the pages are yellowed with age. My scribbly writing is a little faded, but it's mostly quite legible. What follows are just a few chosen extracts from this log. The entries are quite short, but they tell the tale. This is how I recorded our great journey. This is how it was for an 11-year-old boy as we rode the wide oceans of the world on board the Peggy Sue. And then the next chapter, which I'm going to continue, I think, is Chapter 3, Ship's Log. And these are the extracts that were written. September 20. It's 5 in the morning. I'm on watch in the cockpit and no one else is awake. We left Southampton 10 days ago. The channel was full of tankers. There were dozens of them going up and down. So, either Mum or Dad took turns on watch the first 2 nights. They wouldn't let me. I don't know why not. There wasn't any fog, and I can see as well as they can. We were planning on sailing about 200 miles a day. That's about 8 knots. But in the first week, we were lucky if we made 50 miles a day. Barnacle Bill warned us about the Bay of Biscay, so we were expecting it to be bad, and it was. Force 9 gale, force 10 sometimes. We were slammed about all over the place. I thought we'd sink. I really did. Once, when we came up to the top of the wave, I saw the boat on the Peggy Sue pointing straight up at the moon. It was like she was going to take off. Then we were hurtled down the other side so fast I was sure we were going to the bottom. It was bad. I mean, it was horrible, really horrible. But the Peggy Sue didn't fall apart and we made it to Spain. Mum gets quite snappy with us sometimes when we don't do things right. Dad doesn't seem to mind. Not out here. Not at sea. He just winks at me and we get on with it. They play a lot of chess together when it's calm enough. Dad's winning so far, 5 games to 3. Mum says she's not bothered, but she is, I can tell. We only spent a couple of days in La Coruna. Mum slept a lot. She was really tired. Dad did some work on the rudder cable while we were there. He's still not happy with it though. We set off for the Azores 2 days ago. Yesterday was the best day we had for sailing. Strong breeze, blue skies and warm sun to dry things out. My blue shorts blew off in the washing line into the sea. It doesn't matter. I never liked them much anyway. We saw gannets slicing into the sea all around us this afternoon. Really excellent. Stella went mad. I am fed up with baked beans already, and there's still stacks of them down below. October 11. Today I saw Africa. It was in the distance, but Mum said it was definitely Africa. We're going down the west coast. Mum showed me on the chart. The wind will take us down the coast for a few hundred miles, then across the Atlantic to South America. We mustn't drift off course, else we'll get into the doldrums. There's no wind there at all, and we could just sit there, be calm for weeks, forever maybe. It's the hottest day we've had. Dad's very red in the face, and the tops of his ears are peeling. I'm more nutty brown, like Mum. Saw flying fish early this morning, and so did Stella. The Mum spotted a shark off the port bow, a basking shark. She thought, I got the binoculars out, but I never saw it. She said I had to write down in my notebook anyway, and then draw it. I looked them up. They're massive, but they don't eat people, just fish and plankton. I like doing my drawings. My best one so far is a flying fish. I sent a card to Eddie from Cape Verde. I wish he could be here. We'd have a real laugh. Stella loves to chase the football round the cabin and pounce on it. She'll puncture it one day. I know she will. Dad's been a bit gloomy, and Mum's gone to lie down. She's got a headache. I think they've had a bit of a tiff. Don't know what about exactly, but I think it's about Jess. November the 16th. We've just left Recliff. That's in Brazil. We were there for 4 days. We had lots of repairs to do on the boat. Something was wrong with the wind generator and the rudder cable's still sticking. I play football in Brazil. Did you hear that, Eddie? I play football in Brazil. And with your lucky football. Dad and me were just having a kickabout on the beach, and before we knew it, we had a dozen kids joining in. It was like a proper game. Dad set it up. We picked sides. I called my side Mudlarks and he called his Brazil, so they all want to play on his side, of course. But Mum joined in on my side and we won. Mudlarks 5, Brazil 3. Mum invited them back for a Coke on the board afterwards. Stella growled at them and bared her teeth, so we had to shut her down in the cabin. They tried out their English honours. They only knew 2 words, goal and Manchester United. That's 3, I suppose. Mum had the films developed. There was one of some leaping dolphins, another of me at the winch, Mum at the wheel, another of Dad hauling down the mainsail and making a right mess of it. There's one of me diving off a rock into the sea when we stopped in the Canaries. There's one of Dad fast asleep and sunbathing on deck and Mum giggling. She's about to dribble the sun cream all over his tummy. I took that one, my best photo. Then there's one of me doing my maths, sulking and sticking my tongue out. December 25th, Christmas Day at sea. Dad found some carols on the radio. We had crackers, all of them a bit soggy, but none of them cracked. And we had the Christmas pudding Gran made for us. I gave them a drawing each, my flying fish for Dad and one of the skipper in her hat at the wheel for Mum. They gave me a real neat knife they brought in Rio, so I gave a coin back. You're supposed to do that, it's for good luck. When we were in Rio, we gave the Peggy Sue a good scrub down. She was a little bit manky, inside and outside, but she's not anymore. We took on a lot of stores and waters for the long haul to South Africa. Mum says we're doing fine, just so long as we keep south, so long as we stay in the west to east South Atlantic current. We passed south of an island called St. Helena a few days ago. No need to stop, nothing much there, except it's the place where Napoleon was exiled. He died there. Lonely place to die. So, of course, I had to do a history project on Napoleon. I had to look him up in the encyclopedia and write about him. It was quite interesting, really, but I didn't tell them that. Stella's sulking on my bunk. Maybe it's because no one gave her a Christmas present. I offered her a taste of Gran's Christmas pudding, but she hardly gave it a sniff. Can't say I blame her. I saw her sail today, another yacht. We shouted, "Happy Christmas!" and waved, and Stella barked her head off, but they were too far away. When the sail disappeared, the sea suddenly felt very empty. Mum won the chess this evening. She's ahead now, 21 games to 20. Dad said he let her win because it was Christmas. They joke about it, but they both want to win. January the 1st. Africa again. Cape Town, Table Mountain. And this time we're not just sailing by, we're going to put in there. They told me this evening, they didn't want to tell me before in case we couldn't afford it, but we can. We're going to stay for a couple of weeks, maybe more. We're going to see elephants and lions in the wild. I can't believe it. I don't think they can either. When they told me, they were like a couple of kids all laughing and happy. They were never like this at home. These days, they really smile at each other. Mum's getting stomach cramps. Dad wants her to see a doctor in Cape Town, but she won't. I reckon it's the baked beans. The good news is the baked beans have at last run out. The bad news is we had sardines for supper. Ugh. February the 7th. We're hundreds of miles out in the Indian Ocean, and then this happens. Stella hardly ever comes up on the deck unless it's flat calm. I don't know why she came up. I don't know why she was there. We were all busy, I suppose. Dad was brewing up down in the galley, and Mum was at the wheel. I was doing one of my navigation lessons, taking bearings with the sextant, and Pecky Zoo was pitching and rolling a bit. I had to steady myself. I looked up and I saw Stella up at the bow of the boat. One moment she was just standing there. The next, she was gone. We had practiced the man overboard drill dozens of times back in the Solent with Barlock and Bill. Shout and point, keep shouting, keep pointing, turn it into the wind, get the sails down quick, engine on. By the time Dad had the mainsail and the jib down, we were already heading back towards her. I was doing the pointing and the shouting too. She was paddling for her life in the green of the looming wave. Dad was leaning over the side and reaching for her, but he didn't have a safety harness on, and Mum was going mad. She was trying to bring the boat in as close and as slow as she could, but a wave took Stella away from us at the last moment. We had to turn and come back again. All the time I was pointing and shouting. 3 times we came in, but each time we passed her by. Either we were going too fast or she was out of reach. She was weak by now. She was hardly paddling. She was going under. We had one last chance. We came in again, perfectly this time, and close enough for Dad to be able to reach out and grab her. Between the 3 of us, we managed to haul Stella back into the boat by her collar, by her tail. I got a "well done, monkey face" from Dad, and Dad got a huge rollicking from Mum for not wearing his safety harness. Dad just put his arms around her, and she cried. Stella shook herself and went below as if nothing at all had happened. Mum had made a strict rule. Stella Artois is never to go out on deck, whatever the weather, without a safety harness clipped on, like the rest of us. Dad's going to make one for her. I still dream of the elephants in South Africa. I loved how slow they are, and thoughtful. I loved their wise, weepy eyes. I can still see those snooty giraffes looking down at me, and the lion cub sleeping with his mother's tail in his mouth. I did lots of drawings, and I keep looking at them to remind me. The sun in Africa is so big, so red. Australia next. Kangaroos and possums and wombats. Uncle John's going to meet us in Perth. I've seen photos of him, but I've never met him. Dad said this evening he's only a distant uncle. Very distant, Mum said, and they both laughed. I didn't get the joke till I thought about it again when I came on watch. The stars are so bright, and Stella was saved. I think I'm happier than I have been in all my life. April 3rd. Off Perth, Australia. Until today, it had been nothing but empty ocean all the way from Africa. I love it more and more when it's just us and Peggy Sue and the sea. We all do, I think. But then, when we sight land, we always get excited. When we saw Australia for the first time, we hugged each other and jumped up and down. It's like we was the first sailors ever to discover it. Stella Artois barked at us as if we were mad as hatters, which we probably are, but we've done it. We've sailed all the way from England to Australia. That's halfway round the world, and we did it on our own. Mum's been getting stomach cramps again. She's definitely going to see a doctor in Australia. She's promised us and we'll make her keep to it. May 28. At sea again after nearly 6 weeks with Uncle John, we thought we were going to stay in Perth just for a few days, but he said we had to see Australia properly while we were there. He took us to stay with his family on a huge farm, thousands of sheep. He's got masses of horses, so I went riding a lot with my 2 little cousins, Beth and Lisa. They're only 7 and 8, but they could really ride. They call me Mickey, and by the time we left, they both wanted to marry me. We're going to be pen pals instead. I saw a snake called a copperhead. Uncle John said it could have killed me if I'd trodden on it. He told me to watch out for red-backed spiders in the toilet. I didn't go to the toilet very often after that. They called us their pommy cousins, and we had barbecues every evening. They gave us a great time, but I was happy to get back to the Peggy Sue. I'd missed her while I was gone, like I miss Eddie. I've been sending him cards, funny animal cards if I can find them. I sent him one of a wombat. I saw a wombat too, and hundreds of possums, and loads of kangaroos, and they've got white cockatoos in Australia like we've got sparrows at home, millions of them. But out here, it's goals again. Whatever we've been in the world, there's always goals. The plan is we're going to put in at Sydney, explore the Barrier Reef for a bit, then go through the Coral Sea and towards Papua New Guinea. Mum's stomach cramps are much better. The doctor in Australia said that it's probably something she's eaten. Anyway, she's better now. It's really hot and heavy. It's calm too. No wind. We're hardly moving. I can't see any clouds. But I'm sure a storm is coming. I can feel it. July 28. I look around me. It's dark. Dark night, no moon, no stars, but it's calm again. At last. I'll be 12 tomorrow, but I don't think anyone except me will remember it. We've had a terrible time, far worse even than the Bay of Biscay. Ever since we left Sydney, it's been just storm after storm, and each one blows us further north across the Coral Sea. The rudder cable has snapped. Dad's done what he can, but it's still not right. The self-steering doesn't work anymore, so someone's got to be at the wheel all the time, and that means Dad or me, because Mum is sick. It's her stomach cramps again, but they're a lot worse. She doesn't want to eat at all. All she has is sugared water. She hasn't been able to look at the charts for 3 days. Dad wants to put out a Mayday call, but Mum won't let him. She says that's giving in, and she's never giving in. Dad and I have been doing the navigation together. We've been doing our best, but I don't think we know where we are anymore. They're both asleep down below. Dad's really wiped out. I'm at the wheel in the cockpit. I've got Eddie's football with me. It's been lucky for us so far. And now we really need it. We need Mum to get better or we're in real trouble. I don't know if I could stand another storm. Thank God it's calm. It'll help Mum to sleep. You can't sleep when you're being slammed about all the time. It's so dark out there. Black. Stella's barking. She's up by the bow. She hasn't got her harness clipped on. Those were the last words I ever wrote in my log. After that, it's just empty pages. I tried calling Stella first, but she wouldn't come, so I left the wheel and went forward to bring her back. I took the ball with me to sweeten her in, to tempt her away from the bow of the boat. I crouched down. "Come on, Stella," I said, rolling the ball from hand to hand. "Come and get the ball." I felt the boat turn a little in the wind. I knew then I shouldn't have left the wheel. The ball rolled away from me quite suddenly. I lunged after it, but it was gone over the side before I could grab it. I lay there on the deck watching it bob away into the darkness. I was furious with myself for being so silly. I was still cursing myself when I thought I heard the sound of singing. Someone was singing out there in the darkness. I called out, but no one replied, so that was what Stella had been barking at. I looked again for my ball, but by now it had disappeared. The ball had been very precious to me, precious to all of us. I knew then I had just lost a great deal more than a football. I was angry with Stella. The whole thing had been her fault. She was still barking. I couldn't hear the singing anymore. I called her again, whistled her in. She wouldn't come. I got to my feet and went forward. I took her by the collar and pulled. She would not be moved. I couldn't drag her all the way back, so I bent down to pick her up. She was still reluctant. Then I had her in my arms, but she was struggling. I heard the wind above me and the sails. I remember thinking, this is silly. You haven't got your safety harness on. You haven't got your life jacket on. You shouldn't be doing this. Then the boat veered violently and I was thrown sideways. With arms full, I had no time to grab the guardrail. We were in the cold of the sea before I could even open my mouth to scream. Oh no. Chapter 4, Gibbons and Ghosts. I will share that one with you tomorrow.